Rita Hayworth was more than just a Hollywood icon. She was the embodiment of beauty, elegance, and mystery. A woman whose face graced thousands of magazine covers, whose dance moves captivated audiences, and whose name became synonymous with Hollywood's golden age. But behind the glitz and glamour, there was a darkness so deep that even today, few truly understand the horrors she endured. She wasn't just a starlet. She was a survivor, a prisoner in a system that built her up only to tear her down. A woman who never had a chance to live on her own terms. From childhood, Rita was forced into the limelight, not because she wanted to be famous, but because her father, her own father, saw her as a tool for profit. He trained her relentlessly, forcing her to dance, not just for the stage, but for powerful men who saw her as nothing more than entertainment. And the worst part? He didn't just act like her father. He pretended to be her husband to book illegal nightclub gigs. Imagine being a young girl, barely a teenager, having to dance in smoky bars, surrounded by men 3 times your age, while the one person who was supposed to protect you was the one exploiting you the most. But it didn't stop there. As she grew older, Hollywood took over where her father left off. Studios erased her identity, changing her name, altering her face, and even surgically reshaping her appearance. They bleached her hair, raised her hairline with electrolysis, and forced her into a strict diet and beauty regimen. Rita Cancino, the girl with Spanish roots, was erased and replaced by Rita Hayworth, the so-called American dream. Hollywood didn't just want to transform her, they wanted to control her. And when she refused to play by their rules, they punished her. 5 marriages, each one more disastrous than the last. An abusive first husband who stole her money and controlled every aspect of her life. Orson Welles, who wanted to fix her, believing she wasn't smart enough, educated enough, or polished enough to be the woman he imagined. Prince Ali Khan, who showered her with gifts only to betray her publicly. A husband who beat her in front of crowds, humiliating her. And another who used her for his own financial gain, leaving her broke and alone. But perhaps the biggest betrayal of all came from Hollywood itself. The same industry that turned her into a star refused to acknowledge her suffering. When Rita's behavior became erratic, when she forgot her lines, when she lashed out, they labeled her a drunk. She was blacklisted, ridiculed, and abandoned. But what the world didn't know was that Rita Hayworth wasn't an alcoholic. She was battling Alzheimer's, a disease that was virtually unknown at the time. For years, people watched her decline, mocking her for what they thought was self-destruction when, in reality, her brain was slowly being eaten away by a condition she didn't even know she had. She was dying in front of their eyes, and no one did a thing. By the time the truth came out, it was too late. She had lost everything: her career, her health, her dignity. And yet, even in death, her story remains one of the most tragic in Hollywood history. So let me ask you this: was Rita Hayworth ever truly loved, or was she just a beautiful puppet in a world that never saw her as anything more than a product? The answer might break your heart. Hollywood's dirty secret: the era of excess. Hollywood in the 1940s and 1950s was a dream factory, one that produced beauty, fame, and fortune. But behind the dazzling lights and perfectly staged photo shoots, it was also a place of unrelenting control, manipulation, and abuse. Every major studio was its own kingdom, ruled by ruthless executives who treated their actors and actresses like property. If you wanted to be a star, you had to play by their rules. For Rita Hayworth, the transformation from Margarita Cancino to Hollywood's ultimate bombshell was not just about changing her name. It was a full-scale reinvention, one that stripped her of everything that made her unique. Her Spanish roots, erased, her naturally dark hair, dyed a fiery red. Even her hairline was considered too foreign. so they subjected her to painful electrolysis to raise it, making her look more all-American. Every inch of her appearance was carefully designed to fit Hollywood's impossible beauty standards. But the physical transformation was only part of it. Hollywood didn't just want to change her look, they wanted to own her entire existence. At Columbia Pictures, Rita was under the control of Harry Cohn, one of the most feared and powerful studio moguls of his time. Cohn was notorious for his abusive behavior, known for screaming at actresses, threatening careers, and even wiretapping his employees to keep them in line. He saw Rita as his personal investment, someone he could mold into the perfect Hollywood fantasy. He dictated every aspect of her career, what movies she starred in, what roles she played, even who she was allowed to date, and when she resisted, he made her life hell. In 1943, Rita refused to appear in a film that Cohn had chosen for her. His response? 9 weeks of unpaid suspension. Back then, contract stars were owned by the studio. They couldn't choose their own films, and they certainly couldn't disobey orders. If you didn't comply, they would blacklist you, cut your salary, or even spread rumors to ruin your reputation. But Cohn's control over Rita wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Like many studio heads of the time, he believed he had a right to every woman under contract. He would demand private meetings with his actresses, and if they refused, their careers would mysteriously begin to fall apart. It was the ultimate power move, one that kept women silent and trapped in a cycle of exploitation. Rita, desperate to escape his grip, married Orson Welles in 1943, hoping that becoming a wife would protect her. It didn't. Cohn was furious. He saw Rita as his creation, and he didn't like the idea of someone else taking her away. He made sure that her marriage to Welles was a struggle, placing obstacles in her career and keeping her tied to Columbia under ironclad contracts. Even after her divorce, he remained a looming force in her life, controlling her image and ensuring she never truly escaped his influence. But it wasn't just Cohn. Hollywood's entire system was built on exploitation. Young actresses were paraded around at exclusive parties where producers, directors, and powerful men could discover them. These weren't social gatherings, they were hunting grounds. Women were expected to entertain, to be charming, to be available, and if you refused, you didn't work. For Rita, the pressure was relentless. She was marketed as the ultimate fantasy, the love goddess of the era. Her face was everywhere, on magazines, billboards, posters. She was the #1 pinup girl for World War II soldiers, a symbol of American beauty and desire. But behind closed doors, she struggled. She never saw herself as a sex goddess. In fact, she often said, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me." She wanted to be seen as a real person, not just an object of fantasy. But Hollywood didn't care about her struggles. They only cared about keeping the illusion alive. And as long as she continued to play her part, the industry would continue to profit. Her rise to fame wasn't built on opportunity. It was built on control, sacrifice, and pain. Rita was expected to be perfect at all times. Her weight, her appearance, her demeanor, all scrutinized by the studio. If she stepped out of line, she paid the price. Take her relationship with Prince Ali Khan, for example. When she fell in love with the wealthy royal, she saw it as her chance to escape Hollywood's suffocating grip. She wanted a new life, away from the cameras and the control. But when she left the industry, Columbia Pictures retaliated. They suspended her without pay, claimed she had broken contracts, and made sure that returning to acting would never be easy for her. It was a clear message. You don't leave Hollywood unless Hollywood says you can. Even her marriages were treated like scandals rather than personal choices. Every relationship she had was dissected in the press, her failures put on display for the world to see. And when her marriages failed, as they always did, she was the one blamed. But perhaps the biggest betrayal was the way Hollywood abandoned her in the end. As she aged, Rita struggled with early signs of Alzheimer's, though at the time, it was mistaken for alcoholism. Instead of supporting her, the industry that once adored her turned its back on her. She became the subject of ridicule, labeled a has-been, a washed-up star who couldn't handle her own fame. No one cared that her mind was literally deteriorating. No one cared that she was suffering from a disease no one understood at the time. Hollywood had used her up and spit her out. The same system that made her a star had destroyed her from the inside out. So when we look back at Rita Hayworth today, we see the beauty, the glamour, the success. But we also see the dark underbelly of an industry that never truly valued its stars as people. Rita wasn't just a victim of Hollywood. She was a symbol of what happens when an industry prioritizes image over humanity. And that's a legacy Hollywood would rather we forget. The wild parties, the dark secrets, and the price of beauty. Rita Hayworth was more than just a Hollywood icon. She was a woman trapped in an industry that demanded perfection while offering nothing but destruction in return. The price of beauty in Hollywood wasn't just a few painful cosmetic procedures or an exhausting filming schedule. It was total submission. For Rita, that meant surrendering her childhood, her identity, and ultimately, her sanity. She was born into a world of control long before Hollywood got to her. Her father, Eduardo Cancino, was a dancer from Spain, a man who had grand dreams for his daughter, but no boundaries. By the time Rita was 3, she was already being trained to dance. By 12, she was performing in nightclubs, but not just as a child prodigy. Her father would lie about her age, even passing her off as his wife to get past child labor laws. That was just the beginning. Rita later confided to Orson Welles that her father had abused her for years. The man who was supposed to protect her was the one who betrayed her in the worst way possible. And like so many young stars, she had nowhere to go, no one to save her. So she did what every Hollywood actress in her position did. She survived. Hollywood saw her as an exotic beauty, a Latina starlet that needed to be fixed to fit their standards. They stripped her of her heritage, changed her name, forced her into a painful electrolysis procedure to reshape her face, and dyed her hair red to make her look more American. Every inch of her identity was controlled, but the studios didn't just control her image, they controlled her life. The dark side of Hollywood, the wild parties, and the exploitation machine. Hollywood in the Golden Age had a hidden world, one that only the most powerful were invited into. These weren't just parties. They were playgrounds for the rich and powerful. Drugs, alcohol, and exploitation were the norm. Starlets were paraded around, expected to entertain, to please. It was a system designed to break them. For many actresses, refusing meant losing their career. But for Rita, who had already been trained from childhood to obey, there was no way out. Her first husband, Edward Judson, was twice her age and saw her as nothing more than a business opportunity. He pushed her into the spotlight, controlled her finances, and used her as a stepping stone for his own ambitions. When she finally left him, she described the marriage as physically and emotionally abusive. Then came Orson Welles, the genius filmmaker who saw her as a project rather than a person. He married her, but spent most of their relationship trying to change her, educate her, mold her into someone else. When she failed to become what he wanted, he left. The most scandalous marriage of all was to Prince Ali Khan, a literal prince, who promised her an escape from Hollywood's grasp. Instead, she found herself trapped in yet another suffocating relationship, one filled with infidelity and manipulation. He chased her relentlessly, overwhelmed her with wealth and grand gestures, and then humiliated her by cheating on her openly. But no relationship damaged her more than Dick Haymes, a washed-up singer who saw her as a financial opportunity. When they married, he was drowning in debt and used her money to escape his problems. Even worse, he was abusive. One night at Coconut Grove, in front of a crowd, he slapped her across the face. That was the final straw. Rita finally left him. It was a pattern that followed her for life. The men who claimed to love her always wanted something in return: control, power, money. And when she no longer served their purpose, they discarded her, the allegations, the exploitation, and the system that never protected her. The story of Rita Hayworth isn't just one of beauty, fame, and glamour. It's a story of a system that was built to exploit women. Behind every red carpet appearance, behind every iconic photo shoot, there was a woman suffering in silence. Hollywood executives forced Rita into a box, refusing to let her be anything other than the love goddess. She wanted to play more serious roles, but the studios insisted on keeping her as the bombshell. Even when she became one of the most famous women in the world, she was still treated as disposable. She once said, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me." That one sentence says everything. Hollywood built her into a fantasy, one that men obsessed over, one that men wanted to control. But the real woman? No one wanted to see her. She spent years fighting against this image, struggling to be recognized for her talent, not just her looks. But Hollywood didn't care. The downfall, Hollywood never forgives. As she got older, the industry moved on. Younger actresses replaced her, and Rita, once the most desired woman in Hollywood, found herself struggling to find work. Her personal life continued to spiral. Her drinking worsened, not because she was weak, but because she was drowning in the pain of a lifetime of trauma. And then came the most tragic part of her story. For years, people assumed Rita's erratic behavior, her forgetfulness, her mood swings, were all because of alcoholism. She was mocked in the press, dismissed as a washed-up has-been who had ruined herself. No one realized the truth. She wasn't an alcoholic. She was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. By the time she was diagnosed, it was too late. The damage had been done. Hollywood had already discarded her. The world had already judged her, and she spent her final years slowly fading away. She died at just 68 years old, but in reality, Rita Hayworth had been dying for decades. Hollywood built her. Hollywood broke her. And in the end, Hollywood forgot her. But we shouldn't. Because Rita's story isn't just about one woman's tragedy. It's about an entire system that destroyed countless lives. And the worst part? It's still happening today. The unanswered questions. Is Hollywood still hiding the truth? Rita Hayworth's life wasn't just a tragedy. It was a warning. A woman who gave everything to Hollywood, only to be abandoned when she was no longer useful. They called her an alcoholic, mocked her for her decline, and let her fade away in silence. But the truth? She wasn't an alcoholic. She had Alzheimer's. For decades, the media humiliated her, painting her as a washed-up star who had ruined herself. No one stopped to ask what was really happening. No one cared to understand the pain she had endured since childhood. By the time the truth came out, it was too late. She was already gone. Her daughter, Yasmin Aga Khan, became her caretaker in her final years, watching as the world slowly forgot the woman who once captivated millions. Rita spent her last days barely recognizing the people she loved, slipping into a coma before passing away at just 68 years old. The saddest part? Rita never got justice. No one was held accountable for the abuse she suffered, the men who controlled her, or the industry that destroyed her. She was just another casualty of Hollywood's relentless machine. But here's the real question. Has anything changed? Hollywood still chews up young women and spits them out. The system still exploits beauty, still demands perfection, still punishes women for aging. So what do you think? Was Rita's fate inevitable? Or could she have escaped? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into Hollywood's darkest secrets, don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Fame. More stories are coming, ones they don't want you to hear.